Edge of Chaos, starring Neurotoxin and Joe Ryan. Edge of Chaos is a free-flowing discussion occasionally dealing with mature topics.
Water everywhere. Or in our case here in Southern California, nowhere.
Except the ocean, but you can't really...
You can't drink it.
About that.
So,
we'll get to that.
Here's the thing, okay? We're going to do this show, obviously, if you haven't figured out what the topic is, on the water issue and water regulation and droughts. Seeing as last week our distinguished governor, Jerry Brown, or as you call him, Governor, what is it? Moonbeam.
That was his nickname from the 70s.
Yeah,
incidentally, the last time this state was this worse off. Anyways.
Interesting.
Yeah, it must have been his fault that we didn't get rain, right?
I can't stand him to begin with.
I can see some conspiracy nut going, see, he's doing something with the weather, man.
Yeah, he's got this connection to the water gods. Yeah, okay. In any case, obviously in California, we've had this problem for a very, very long time.
This is year 4, I think, of the drought, if I'm not mistaken.
But I don't think it's ever been this bad. This is a record.
No, it is the rerecord of going back as far as they've kept records,
but
yes.
Moonbeam actually declared a statewide emergency in terms of watering. And my take on this, my kind of initial take, and I'm probably not as educated on this particular topic as I should be, is relatively simple. When you build cities the size of Los Angeles in the desert, you might at some point run into a water shortage. I mean, it just really, we're surprised by this.
Water has always been a problem. It always will be. You know, back in the 30s when they were wrestling it away from farmers. I mean, that's especially in the case of LA. And here's the thing. So I live in Texas now, of course. Texas is also in a drought. Regions of it are. It's currently not as bad as California is. Not as much of the state is in drought. Where I live in Austin, there's still a problem with our watershed because the river we rely on comes from an area that is in exceptional drought right now. But there's other ways to mitigate that. But here's the thing. I want to get off on the policy discussion this way. You know, we're in year 4 of this drought, or you guys are now. I don't live here anymore. And they're
try not to sound so nostalgic, Joe.
And this is how I want to start this discussion, because I know that this is a problem that I love posing to libertarians, because there's no way an individual or a single town can manage it on their own. There just isn't. Because if the river comes through your town, it comes from somewhere else. What feeds it? What towns does it go through on the way? And it also goes somewhere else. So it's like if you were a dick, you could build a dam out on the outskirts of your town, and now the river doesn't go anywhere else. It just stays there, kind of.
It reminds me of a dialogue from the movie Fight Club, where it talks about soap.
Right.
And where soap comes from, they didn't know that up on top of the mountain there was another civilization that would kill people by throwing them in the river.
And that's what made the soap. Yeah, right. That's what made it soap. But it's a uniquely severe problem that requires a lot of coordination, and it tests a lot of the relationships between cities, counties, regional areas, and especially in a state this big, which have been, let's say, testy at best historically.
I like that.
Northern Cal hates Southern Cal. There's always a wrestling match going on. And so here's the thing. I'll just throw this out there to start this discussion. They waited way too long to have this talk. Even apart from any policy that's going on, this was an executive action that he took. He immediately, enacted it into policy. 25% cut on all watering. But they waited 3 years before doing anything. And now we're in year 4 and they're actually doing something. They only started with recommendations last year. They weren't forcing cuts on anybody. They were just recommending 25%. And, lo and behold, water use they studied after the recommendations actually went up. So it made things worse. And not to mention, that entire time, Mother Nature has just been fucking this state even harder and harder and harder. Because 3 years ago, when this drought started, there was a snowpack. This year, and this is where the announcement was made, was in the middle of this nice grassy meadow. And everyone thought, oh, what a nice place to have a press conference. Yeah? You know what's supposed to be around them in that?
Snow.
There should have been buried head deep in snow. And there was none. That's bad. That's really bad. And let me quantify the numbers. It's 5% of normal this year statewide. 5%. This is how I was trying to explain it to my mother. If you had a paycheck come every month, it's the same amount, and then the next month it was 95% less, would you be freaking out about that? Yes. Would it cause for huge changes to how you do things? Yes, it would. So, I guess, just to kick this off and kind of start the scrum this way, how is it possible that anyone can handle this without kind of a lot of coordination? And maybe you would talk about the idea of splitting the state in two. I know a lot of people have talked about that.
We could, but I really don't see how. I mean, yes, that may help with this particular problem, but we're talking about communal resources in general, and no, splitting the state would not necessarily solve that problem. Then you'd have three shitty ways of doing things, and if you split the California into three, you'd still have all three of them would still be bigger than half of the states in the United States.
Well, the funny part of that is they still have to deal with each other.
Right.
Whether they're different states or not. These areas still have to deal with each other.
That really wouldn't do a whole lot. The water, you're not going to make the water resources problem any smaller.
Let me throw one more thing in there. This is not a California problem. The whole western United States is suffering, including Texas. Like I said, Arizona is having problems. Nevada's having problems. So how do you deal with that even as a state?
Okay, so you said a lot there, Joe, so let me try to address a few of these things. Okay, first of all, this problem is not unique. Okay, we have a concept in basic political science and political economy. It's called common goods. And a common good is a good that's not excludable. So if I have a business and I'm making chairs, and you come over and you want a chair and you don't have money, I can turn you around, give you a boot in the ass, and not sell you a chair. But I cannot stop you from using, let's say, air. Right?
Right.
And water is another one of these goods that we don't think of it this much anymore because we have things like irrigation and faucets and running water. But really, water is a common good. You really cannot stop someone from using that resource, but it is a finite resource. So the use of common goods, you can even almost nowadays, and I know I'm going to piss off a lot of people with this statement, you can almost refer to medicine as a common good. Because if you walk into an emergency room bleeding and with broken bones and you have no health insurance and no way to pay for it, they're still going to help you. They may not help you as much as they would someone that pays, but they're still going to help you. So it's a non-excludable good that is finite. In using that, you're making someone else wait in line, and you're not paying for it. And in any kind of political economics, these are the most difficult things to deal with. It's common goods. So when you say this problem is unique, it really is not. I'm not saying it's not serious. I'm not saying it doesn't require coordination. I'm just saying it's something. Roads, even though actually those roads are more like toll goods, but still it's very difficult to exclude. It's just that you can build more of them. You can't produce more water necessarily. That being said, that does not mean there's not free market solutions for common goods. Remember, libertarians are not against coordination. We're not against any kind of risk pooling or communal ways of dealing with things. We're against government. And I think the whole problem with modern politics and a modern outlook on economics is when we think communal, we think government. Where does this come from? 100 years ago, this was not the case. And, if you look at, some of the original ideas of communism, not Leninism, but, Tolstoy was a huge communist, right? They were talking about private cooperative farms and communes that are voluntary. Now, I'm not a communist by any stretch of the imagination, but that's where that idea came from. And if you look at most of the world, that's actually how they do agriculture now. It's not because you can't run a little family farm anymore and be successful. A lot of it is because of water.
There's a lot of co-ops in Austin, too, with farms and markets, too.
If you look at the market share of those in the U.S. or even in Texas or even in Austin versus versus in agricultural industry, versus and you compare it to the market share in places like France or Israel or really most of Europe, most of Asia, those communes are nothing. You'd have to look this up, but trust me on this right now.
You know what I found interesting? You would think California would be ultra regulated with everything, and you would think Texas would be the opposite. Texas actually, and in particular my area of Texas, they have a very clear plan that they passed a couple of years ago. It was actually in 2011, the last wet year in California, whereby it's measurable amounts of reservoir capacity. If it's at this level, we do these conservation methods. We do this level, we do this. And it's everyone knows what the severity scale is and acts accordingly. And this is top down. Whereas California, they're not even regulating their groundwater, or at least they weren't until recently. And as a result, just to use one example, as rivers and dams and all that has been cut, all the agribusiness and whatnot has just been sucking the groundwater dry because they got no other choice. Okay. And it's not regulated. So now you got a double whammy of a problem.
Yes. Now, having looked at this, so see, you're blaming deregulation, and yet you're talking about some of the reasons that we have such a huge water shortage here in California. For one, 4/5 of the water usage here is agricultural water.
That's
because
true,
we have
right.
some
It
pretty
is.
intense farming. In. You put a bunch of water-needy farms in the middle of the desert. What do you think is going to happen, people?
Yeah, a third. I was reading a third of the fruit in all of America is grown in California. People think of the Midwest as being no, it's California.
You're growing fucking oranges in the desert. What do you expect?
Well, and avocados.
And avocados, I don't know how water hungry those are. I'm not hugely specifically educated on this topic as far as the agriculture side of what needs how much water, but citrus is very water needy.
That needs to be addressed for sure. And I've been reading a lot of things online in forums where people were talking. You can't. That's an elephant in the room in any discussion in this state. You can't not address that.
What I'm saying is these are not communes. These are not small farms. These are mega agricultural corporations that are heavily, heavily subsidized by the federal government. And you want to blame the lack of regulation for this problem. Okay? Now, let's talk about these cities that are built in the middle of the desert. Like Los Angeles, city of, 18 million people?
Like Las Vegas, for that matter.
Megalopolis. Las Vegas has 800,000 people.
Not anymore.
No. Look it up. Okay.
Well, I just mean they've tripled
the whole
in the last
metro
20 years,
area, maybe like 1.2.
Right.
That means Los Angeles is about 13 times the size.
No, yeah.
So the comparison really doesn't fly.
But it's like you look at a place like that, and even its existence is like in spite of nature, definitely.
Right.
And then it's
agreed.
And LA, they've had that problem since the 40s and the 50s.
Yeah.
Like I said, when they were wrestling
Were
farmers
those cities they built by private enterprise? Were they built by the free market? Did some developer come out and say, you know what? I really like the lack of water and the fact that there's nothing here. Let's build a big city.
Isn't it both, though? I mean,
okay,
don't both politicians
both?
want to attract private business?
Okay, well, by that logic, yes, agribusiness is a private business too. What I'm saying is, these kind of problems tend to result from public-private partnership, and I'm intentionally using that term because it's becoming a big term in grant writing and all that. Now we think, government's bad, corporations are bad, so let's put them together and that'll be great. You gotta be freaking kidding me.
Anything dumber than
exactly.
work together.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, and I would argue that, I have in the past, that usually when you have public and private together, you get things like electric utility monopolies.
It's very similar.
You get the worst of both worlds where they get found liable for burning half the county down, and guess what? They pass that cost on to you, and there's nothing you can do about it because guess what? The government lets them operate.
Pretty much. But what you have with the water is actually even worse. Because a lot of this, basically, yes, you can talk about, the government needs to do a better job of regulating developers and making sure that zoning laws and community plans and resource distribution plans or allocation plans are followed. But the reality is, if you look deeper into this, the developers and the agribusiness and all that, they're all subsidized by government. They build this shit knowing that in a free market sense, if they were to have to provide their own water at the actual cost of that water and whatever other resources they're using, they would have absolutely no chance. They would be colossally at a loss. But they can pass those costs on to taxpayers in the form of subsidies. So that's why this is built. It's not that, yes, there are regulations that local governments, state, whatever, counties have to look at and say, okay, this development that we're building, how much water is this going to use? We don't have the water supply. So every time something gets okayed anyway, and I'm very closely involved in this kind of thing in San Diego, this is what I do for a living, is I'm an organizer and I work in campaigns, so I can talk about this all day. And I can tell you, those requirements for local governments are very easy to get around if you're having your palm greased by a developer that's subsidized by federal and state government, because they're way bigger.
One example, and it's not water, but it's still a finite resource of traffic capacity.
Yes.
Everyone's been up in arms about the one Paseo development.
Mm-hmm.
And they're building in the
water
middle
is an issue there too.
One of the most congested intersections I can think of in Carmel Valley, which I've driven through on many occasions. It's a shithole as far as traffic is concerned. And they want to build a giant multi-use thing that's just going to attract more residents and more traffic at the same time. What a great idea, sure.
But what I'm saying is, if you've got one side of government feeding into this and basically taking away the free market's natural control, natural check of competition, and basically cost-benefit, okay, how much is this going to cost versus how much am I going to benefit from it as a large businessman? Now, if the government's allowing me to pass on the costs by subsidizing me, I no longer care. So when you talk about, okay, this is a finite resource, the water goes someplace else, yes, theoretically, ideally, that's a problem. Practically, the person taking that water will think about this stuff because it will come back to bite them. Now, we look at water regulation in this state. Of course, in this state, all the water, there's no private utilities. It's not electricity. Water is provided by the government. The government provides the water. Now, sometimes they'll contract certain services out, but still,
it's like city
it's the water.
agencies to county to state. Yeah.
Right. No, sometimes there's private contractors that are involved in the purification or whatever, but still. So, what this does, of course, is it regulates the price of water. It says you can only sell water for this price, and again, the justification is, well, we don't want there's a huge shortage, so if you deregulate prices are going to go up, and then the average person won't be able to pay their water bill. Okay, that's a reasonable consideration. The problem with that is, now, because you have all this overdevelopment in a very dry area and all this over-farming, somebody in private enterprise, some capitalist, there's that dirty word, might have an incentive to come in and build, let's say, a desalination plant, because, hey, we are right on a coast of a fucking ocean here. And that ocean, that is water. It's not, though. This is a quantitative measurement. You have one plant being built in this entire county. That plant is tiny, and it's taking 10 years to build. Because that's a plant that's been contracted out by the government. Because the thing is, no private industry wants to do that if water prices are regulated. Private industry is attracted where prices are high. Because they're thinking, hey, we can sell at those prices. That's how you increase supply. That's how prices come down.
Yeah, that plant even happening is a definitely someone was seeing. In the very near term, we're going to need prices are going to be high enough to warrant this being a thing. Now
it took 10 years.
It's like fracking or burning tar sand oil. It's worth it because, well, of course, different thing is the price collapse. But anyhow,
yes, but it took
on the long term,
10 years for them to decide to build that one desalination
and it's
plant.
still not done. I think it's like next year it's going to start.
There's actually a number of solutions to this water crisis. Another one, some people I know personally here in San Diego have been talking about, and they're looking into this, is water recycling plants.
Toilet to tap.
It's not toilet
Quote,
to tap.
unquote.
It's no. See, that's
what
just,
it was
it's
assigned.
propaganda,
yeah, right?
And it's propaganda assigned to it by people that don't want it done. But really, people, I hate to tell you this, you're just drinking the same water over and over. I mean, come on, it comes out of you.
It already is happening. It
is happening. All water is regular. There's a finite amount of water on Earth.
I mean, it's Earth. Like it's so it's only clean if it's evaporated and rains back down on us. I guess.
No, we can filter it. That's not really a problem.
Well, that's what they're saying.
You have too little water, you filter it and you send it right back. I don't see the problem with this. But again, the problem is that it's expensive. This process takes up a lot of resources. So whoever's engaging in, whoever's building these plants, is going to expect to turn a profit. And the only way you're going to turn a profit in this state with water is if you're heavily, heavily subsidized. Because your costs are going to be huge, and you're going to be selling the water, even if it's back to the state, at a price determined by the state. So, you want to tell me this is a free market problem? I'm going to laugh at you.
Well,
this is a government problem. And it's not a socialist problem. It's not a Keynesian problem. It's a regulation problem. Regulation and subsidy problem. This is Keynesianism at its worst. It's trying to regulate both sides, and this is the outcome.
Well, lack of rain and snow is another, but
in the desert, you're going to have that sometimes.
Well, I mean, but this is still like an exceptional time, like historically speaking. But then again, we don't have a very long historical view of record keeping in the terms of nature. Nature is thousands of years, millions of years. It's a long time,
and it doesn't give a shit if you calculate it wrong.
Anyhow, here's another question here. Obviously, agribusiness is the elephant in the room, but at what point do you start literally banning things like having natural grass? You know what I mean? Because it's like when you look at, okay, in an aggregate, it does add up to a lot of wasted water, let's say. When you're living in the middle of a fucking desert and you think you can have a half-acre lot of a house with this lush green grass, and what it takes to get that, to have that, is that something...
Why do you need to ban it? Why can't you just have free market prices on water and see who still wants to have that lot?
It makes you wonder, yeah.
Right? I mean,
Well, I guess the government could just sit here and find these people. That'd be one way.
No, you're not... How... Okay.
I don't necessarily want to promote that side of things.
But the government's already doing such a great job of everything else with this. Don't we really want them going house to house, determining if what's growing in your backyard is appropriate and if you're watering it enough? I'm not even talking from a corruption standpoint. I'm talking from an efficiency standpoint.
Yeah, Texas doesn't pick and choose. It says, fine, you want grass? You only get to water 1 day a week. That's how they handle it.
How the fuck do you police that?
They have water cops. They have water cops here already.
Water cops. Oh, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
So you got a guy going around saying, hey, you're
look,
watering on the wrong day.
Well, not to mention they see if it's running into the street. That's too much. Yeah, there's hours per day. In Texas, you can't do it before a certain time and after a certain time of morning. Like it's after sunset.
Okay, so what if I work a schedule that doesn't allow me to water at the allotted time on the allotted day? Okay, so now what kind of costs are you passing on to me, though?
And it's interesting.
How much are you infringing on my civil liberties?
If I told you Texas is like that, you would have probably been like, really? They regulate their citizens that heavily? No,
I believe it completely.
That's completely how it's been.
Government's government, red or blue. But what I'm saying is, it seems the more complicated and the more out of control it gets, the more I'm just going to sit on my hands and say, you know what? Price is the ultimate regulator. Let the prices go up, and let's see who wants to waste water. Let's see the person that now wastes water when they get their $500 monthly water bill. Let's see how much water they want to waste the next month.
Well, the good news is if the government's controlling the price, they could just let it go up, couldn't they? I mean, can't California just triple its rates?
Well, okay, first of all, then that's no, because then you're setting the price. The whole point is for the price to be a free market thing. Price is the regulator in free markets. If you just triple the rates, basically you're tripling the rates in a punitive sense, then you're going to fuck over the poor.
What if you tie rates to amount of snowpack?
Again, then you have to measure it again.
Yeah.
Think of again. We're not talking
I'm just starting to think outside the box because
we're talking efficiency.
The climate scientists' argument of this is get used to this shit because this is not going away. And like the other data that's come down is we're running our models and it's a fucking nightmare. You guys don't even want to look at these numbers, how bad it's going to be. And we're talking droughts that go on for decades, maybe. We don't know, but it's looking really bad.
Right. It's not going to get any better. And, climate change is a topic I've actually been meaning to do a show on for a while. And
it's coming. We're still trying to figure out how we're going to do it.
I think we'll get into it. I think this may be a good lead into it.
This is the first
try. One of the things that's been going on in the United States in general is just the patterns of precipitation have been shifting. And this is not me advocating for global warming. This is reality. This has been measured. We don't necessarily, we can argue about where it's coming from, the extent of it, what the precedent is. But people, if you're denying this, you're just freaking denying that the grass is green. Just stop.
I don't want to deny that something has happened. Look at the fucking jet stream as it was this winter. Ask yourself how Boston got 120 fucking inches of snow and California didn't get any.
So
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
The water and
something
the heat are not going where we're used to them going because Mother Nature is an indifferent bitch and she doesn't give a shit where you plant your corn and where you're raising your cattle. She wants to send the water a different way this year and cause a drought and then corn prices go up by 50%. That's your problem.
If this goes the way it looks like, it's going to go, by the way, Canada needs to be the one to build a fucking border wall. Because next thing you know, all the prime, water-rich land is going to be up there.
This is my favorite example to bring up, again, in favor of free market solutions to this. Because to answer this, in response to this, this kind of coordination is not a bad thing. But in a system coordinated so poorly and so top-down, you simply cannot adjust to this fast enough. And all the solutions you're offering, tie it to type of what you're watering, raising prices, tie it to the size of the water caps. It's not a bad idea. The problem is you have to do all this in a matter of a certain time. It's very expensive. You have to do it with government standards. It's slow. By the time you've done all your measurements and all your research, the pattern's changed. The free market, the benefit of the free market is adjusts very, very quickly because people are driven by profit. People driven by the public good, they do not move as quickly. I know that's breaking a lot of progressive hearts, but it's reality. My favorite example, though, is Fukushima. We all remember Fukushima. Now, you can bring up Chernobyl, and the person say, oh, well, of course, that was the corrupt Soviet government. There was no accountability. Okay.
Yeah. Everyone thought Japan had their shit together. That's what made that so scary.
Japan, actually, corruption in Japan is almost unheard of. It's one of, if you look at the Transparency International, I recommend this site, look it up, one of the lowest corruption places in the world.
And yet, there were Soviet leftover guys from the old Politburo type system going, damn. when they saw what was going on over
okay,
there.
So here's the
TEPCO.
recap. What happened was this company, TEPCO, that was producing the power in this nuclear plant, was partially owned by the Japanese Federal Department of Energy. Remember what I said? Public-private partnership?
Yeah.
This is what happens.
Working together for a shittier life for all.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So you have that, and of course Japan was in a very bad place economically at the time. And the same people, basically they have the same boss, the people who are responsible for producing enough energy, I'm talking at the federal government level, to feed all the industry of Japan and basically not have an energy shortage, are also, under them, is also the people responsible for safely operating a nuclear plant and making sure that it's up to par with all the safety.
Cross purposes, anyone?
A little bit of a conflict of interest, or just a tad.
That's kind of like here with bankers and regulators switching jobs every few years,
It's
right?
like
one year you're the banker and he's the regulator. Next year, flip flop. Yeah,
I would more equate it to putting a reformed pedophile in charge of kindergarten, but to teach kindergarten. But that's just me. I mean, no, it really is this bad. So then, what happened was they found this. Again, Japan is very transparent. Once they catch you, you're not going to get away. It's not even Europe. It's don't do this shit in Japan. You will get caught. What they found is that the same bureaucrats that were supposed to enforce the renovation, because this plant, they found it was built to withstand a tsunami that size. It's like, how the fuck did this happen?
kind of.
Right. No. It was built to withstand it. The problem is they hadn't renovated it. It wasn't up to, like, they have to renovate it so many times, like every so often, to make sure it's still safe.
It was half built that way because and maybe this is what you're talking about. The new laws were that maybe it's a design flaw. Okay, everything's up high enough and the walls on it, but gee, all the generators that would keep the cooling system running if power went out and we had to shut the reactors down are below the safe level and would all be flooded if we actually got hit by a tsunami. So essentially, they're just fucking ornamentation out there. They wouldn't actually be running when we actually need them. They would be fucked and drowned in salt water, which is exactly what happened.
Right, and the surveyors from the Department of Energy that partially owns the plant came out and said, "Yeah, we're going to turn a blind eye. You don't have to renovate this right away. We'll write down that you did, but you didn't." Because
once
if
again,
you start
the Soviets
renovating
are
it, right, you're gonna have to shut part of the plant down, and we're gonna have a huge countrywide energy shortage. So let's recap. We reached consensus with the surveyors and the bureaucrats. We lied to the voters, because if this had come out in public, the parliament would have been gone so fast in Japan. This kind of shit does not fly. They would have been resigning. They wouldn't even have to be voted out. Okay? So we lied to the voters. What are we going to do about that tsunami?
Yeah. They were basically betting it wouldn't happen on their watch. Basically. And most of the time you bet and that comes up fine, but then every 100 years you have a fuck-off big old
and it was a pretty big fuck-up, right.
Yeah.
Here's one of my favorite quotes, and this is a Neurotoxin original. Nature doesn't negotiate.
No.
It doesn't give a shit.
No.
Like,
you can't stand in front of a 30-foot tsunami and going, do you really have to hit us today? Can't we... Okay,
could you go down to 20 feet?
Maybe, let's say 15. There's 15, and then you can flood a little bit of the town, but not all of it.
It's like, you can't bargain with it.
No.
You can't reason with it. You can't bribe it. It's just going to happen. And that's what we're having happen here with the water.
I thought it was hilarious, by the way, that after that happened and all that attention was paid, they found out that San Onofre nuclear plant here...
Oh.
Oops! They had our own potential TEPCO situation brewing there, and they shut it down. So, yeah.
Right. So, again, you see, where I push on this, just unapologetically, is every time one of these things happen, it's really difficult to blame the free market, because every time it's regulation failure. Every single time. Now, yes, when you have the free market and you have corporations and private enterprise come to this, yes, arguably, they're going to be less accountable. They're going to fuck up, they're going to dam the water and leave a whole city dry and say, oh, who gives a fuck? We made a profit, we don't give a shit. Okay, so yes, there are definitely costs. I'm not saying that those don't exist. What I'm saying is, at least people expect that to happen. They expect that from the free market, and this is something that, if you do that, there are costs involved. With government, we kind of expect to be protected until the tsunami hits.
Yeah.
And we, with regulation, we think, oh no, they're accountable. Where's the accountability? It seems to me like all the accountability is after the fact. And then after the fact, it's the same government that fucked up in the first place coming in saying, okay, now you have to give us more money and more of your liberty so we can save you from our fuck up.
Boy,
How is this any kind of argument against a libertarian approach? My thing is, I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting into a monologue here. These mega corporations capable of doing the amount of damage that you're talking about doing only exist in a free market because they're subsidized. Yes, there would be a lot of free market, and a lot of private enterprise that's kind of belligerent and doesn't care about what it does. It just wouldn't get big enough to actually do that kind of damage. Competition would take care of a lot of the problem. I'm not saying there wouldn't be a problem. I don't need to say there wouldn't be a problem because there's all kinds of problems with regulation. All I have to say is there would be less of a problem when there's regulation. Simple as that.
Didn't Standard Oil exist before a lot of regulation?
Well, that would depend on what you consider regulation. Actually, it did not. Okay, perfect example. Now, excellent. We're going back to the Gilded Age. I love it. What regulation created all those monopoly monstrosities in the Gilded Age? Come on, Joe. History quiz.
I know there was.
I'm a very bad person to make this argument.
I remember there was a law.
It was called. There's actually a set of laws called the American System, enacted by House Speaker Henry Clay was the author of it.
Oh, Clay.
And he was in the very beginning of the 19th century, 1815, 1820, actually during the era of good feelings, when there's a one-party system. He enacted a whole bunch of tariffs. He was a big industry investor. Mm-hmm. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
And he wanted the fledgling American industry, this is how it was sold, has to be able to compete with the British and the French imports, which of course their industrial revolutions were 30, 40 years ahead of ours. And he was hugely, Thomas Jefferson was pretty old by this point, but the followers of Jefferson were very, very opposed to Clay because they wanted an agrarian economy. They weren't big on building up industry. So this is his way of building up our industrial economy too fast. And when you build too fast and you subsidize, of course, these weren't subsidies, these were tariffs, which drove up the prices of imported products, making people buy domestic products and growing domestic industry.
Yeah.
Protectionism. What happens with that is you have very, very few players. Very few big players that are able to take advantage of this. And then 60 years down the line, the only reason it even took that long was because it was the 19th century with 19th century communications. Now you have all these monopolies because you have so few that they can join into monopolies. And that is where Standard Oil came from. So no, I'm sorry, but you cannot blame that shit on the free market. It didn't happen in Europe.
They did not have a Rockefeller in Europe, no.
There weren't. You did not have those kinds of monopolies.
The only people that were that rich in Europe were royalty.
Right, they're aristocrats, which they had their own set of protectionism.
Yeah.
Right? So no, it's very, if when you get down to the bottom, you realize, no, there really isn't a free market. It's like Ron Paul says, it's very difficult to blame capitalism when we really haven't had capitalism.
You know that the Rockefeller money stays in trust indefinitely until the third generation dies. So every Rockefeller grandchildren has to die, and that money goes. There's an entire company. I forget what it's called. It's not the Rockefeller Group. I think it may be called that, but it's an entire company. Its job it is just to manage this money. It's still there. It never was spent. They're living off the proceeds of it still. It's so massive. Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
I did not know that.
And I looked it up. Yeah, I've been interested in like how trusts are managed and how families pass on money. It's interesting. That was interesting. Yeah, it's because he didn't want any one of them to run off with all the money. He basically
smart guy, but
yeah, of course they've all. I mean, they're provided a very generous allowance. You would imagine that a guy that was worth, what was it, $700 billion in today's dollars back then? That's a pretty healthy nest egg.
Yeah, I think you might be okay for the winter.
Over the years.
I think you might survive the winter, eh?
But, I don't know. I guess I wanted to bring this up because it is a unique challenge. And you would think Texas, that whole thing of well, I'm a rancher, I have my own land, that whole Bundy mentality of this is my strip of dirt and I manage it how I like. It's interesting where it flies in the face of, an idea of you have to be mindful of now we have a whole region, a whole ecological region in that case, it has certain rivers that feed it. Everyone's got to share, and at some point, there has to be some kind of agreement on how that is divvied up.
And again,
it's going to only get uglier, by the way, because worldwide we're going to have this problem, and that's the next set of resource wars that's going to go on. It was oil, now it's going to be water, and it's already starting to happen. I mean, there's a lot of people are saying Syria. That's what fucking started it.
Water?
Yeah, that's
Did
part
not
of
know
it.
that. What happened there?
Well, there was a lot of just how the government just didn't respond to it at all. People were just going thirsty. Farms were drying up. People were losing their.
I remember reading about this.
And
yes.
that's part of what set all. That was the powder cake. That was the spark that set the powder cake off.
I did not know.
There was shit going on. Obviously, you have a dictator there. No one's in love with the guy, but that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. That a lot of people were saying,
But again, I agree with you. People do have to share. They do have to coordinate. They do have to have some sort of agreement. Okay, you have your water, I have my water. And there's actually a lot of studies done on this, believe it or not, in Africa, in very wild, undeveloped places where you have farmers and they have a very thin stream of water. Mm-hmm. And it's how do we divide this water? There's enough here for everybody, but one person hogs it and we're all fucked. Right. Including the person who hogged it, he's going to have no one to sell his food to because everyone's going to be dead.
Right.
So they don't know
that's a problem.
And this happens, and again, of course, it's the tragedy of the commons. Everyone wants to use up the common resource. No one wants to think even a few steps ahead. Okay, if you fuck over your entire community, you're not going to survive either. This is not, I'm a libertarian, but I understand this. This is not, okay, you can't just, you can't go it alone. It doesn't work that way. We do have to coordinate. When you coordinate, in order for effective coordination, effective negotiation, effective kind of communal cooperation, everyone kind of has to be on the same level. They have to have approximately the same amount of power. And this is where competition comes in. So I say these mega corporations don't work. Small businesses competing with each other won't necessarily get violent. What we have happening here is we don't have anything like that. We have people that have access to all the resources because they have the government in their pockets. And that's exactly what we're talking about with these mega developers building this stuff, right? And these agricultural businesses. And even, Nestle's been in the news because they have that famous...
They've been, right. That is a big problem because they've been sucking up this well of water that they have.
But it's it's on Native American land.
It's on Native American land, and the state can't get at them to regulate it, and then they're just selling it back to everyone around it. And that CEO, he's not fucking helping matters. You heard his quote, right? Well, water's not a human right. If people don't have the money for it, fuck them. Let them go thirsty. That's essentially what he said.
Wonderful.
Wow. So it's like,
hey guys, hey, your PR chief, fire him. That's my advice to him. But
so you might want to avoid that brand. By the way, you're right. I forgot about that. That's again, another example.
But again, you can look at it that way, or you can look at it and say, okay, look, so the state government, or federal government, fucked over the Native Americans so badly that they decided to give these tribes this unrestricted land access that, okay, now if you're a Native American tribe, you can do whatever resources you have on your land, no taxes, nothing, use them however you want. And 100 years later, this comes to bite us in the ass. They make a deal with a huge corporation because, again, you have to be a huge corporation to build a water purifying plant on a fucking Native American soil, right? So again, this is the unbalanced playing field as a result of government regulation. The problem with it wants to be equal. And again, I'm not even talking about corruption. You want equality, but it's so complicated and so difficult to accomplish that it just keeps ending up in short-term swings and imbalances.
I suppose so. But people need to get used to the new normal, though, I think, around here. So, I don't know. I guess good luck with all that, but not like I'm living anywhere any better right now. It's been worse, but yeah, the outlook doesn't look so
going
great.
To have, there's been kind of a lot of video games, like if anyone's ever been a fan of the Command and Conquer series, for example, like ecology wars are going to start becoming a much bigger problem.
Definitely.
It's going to start coming through the surface because, like it or not, we've really fucked this place up. Like, and by this place, I mean the planet. Like,
it's going to get to a point where there's going to be these big American cities that people can't live there anymore because literally the water is going to come up and swallow them. I mean, in the coming decades, that's what's going to happen.
And one of the reasons we had the Great Depression is you had this thing called the Dust Bowl, Because you
Which
had
may
these
come back.
mega lumbering corporations that went through and chopped down too many trees in the Rocky Mountains and the Appalachians, so all the water actually brought down all the mudslides on the farms in the central United States. On the small
part of
farms.
it was the cutting of all the native grasslands
Right.
too.
But yeah, there's multiple factors, but that was one of them. So this short-sighted, and again, those lumbering corporations, where'd they come from? They came from the 19th century, the Gilded Age, from the same thing, from the monopolism. So these are things that they don't seem like a big deal, but it's just short-sightedness. And the government, if there's anything it's great at, it's short-sightedness. Okay, we're going to do this little thing to solve this big problem. It's like, what are you going to do when you get there? Just shut up. Get him out of here.
We won't be in office then.
Exactly. And, Nikita Khrushchev, who is one of the former Soviet premiers.
The two letters?
Huh? What?
Is this the 2 letters story?
No. This is completely different. This is a joke about him that was made about him. Like, there's a Soviet joke that I absolutely love. And it talks about how, like, every premier would deal with a problem if he were riding a train and you reach a station and there's no further tracks. Right. What do you do? What does he do?
Oh, yeah.
Khrushchev, I'm sure I've told you this joke at some point, Joe. Khrushchev's response is, simple. Let's take the tracks from behind the train, put them in front of the train, and keep going. What the fuck? What about the next train, buddy? This is just all this monopolism and corporate subsidizing in a nutshell, and stimulus in general. It's a great short-term solution, and in 10 years you're back in the same problem, and I've completely destroyed the environment in the process.
Or like in traffic, you sit down, you write 2 letters. Like, okay, first time you get into trouble, you just blame everything on me. And you get through it. So first time something happens, they blame it all on the previous guy. They get out of trouble, everything's fine. And then it gets in trouble again, opens the second letter. Second letter, it's like, sit down, write 2 letters.
Right. If you're lucky, you've moved up to higher office before you have to open the second letter. And actually, municipal governments, cities, counties, they're notorious for this. Because a lot of the politicians, they're career politicians, they're young, relatively, for a politician, the late 30s, early 40s, they want to move up. So they hope that by the time shit hits the fan, they're already in state government or federal. Case in point, Detroit.
They make a splash and then move up, yeah.
Well, Detroit.
That was a thing in The Wire, too, that mayor. He really only wanted to be mayor so he could be governor.
Right.
And he wanted only to be governor to be president. So,
right.
Yeah.
So, I know I kind of like to end every show on this note, but it is reality. I feel like, this age of mega government and centralized government is only, you could maybe trace it back to the mid-19th century. It's really not that long ago. And I feel like the ecological damage and just the economic damage from the short-sightedness and the constant swings, like we have fewer swings, but they're so much bigger. The frequency is so much increased that this is going to bring down centralized government if nothing else does. But yes, it's going to be a very difficult time in general for humanity, because it's one thing when you're having political problems and wars and it's other people are causing a problem. It's very different when it's ecology. So really not a whole lot you can do. You can take down the government by force, but you can't make it rain.
No. Yeah, all the people in Texas praying for it, that didn't
work.
No. It's raining a little more, but still not much.
So it worked a little bit? Everybody's, the whole
not where they were
praying?
Not where they were praying, so yeah, too bad.
God got that wrong, huh?
I guess the only message I would have to other people is, like, even if you're a climate change denier, just think of conservation. Just think of ways you can reduce your own use. It's for your own good at this point. It's survival. This is not politics. This is the lizard brain kicking in. How do I survive? That's what you got to be thinking right now.
And I think that this will make a great... This will motivate us to finally make that show that we want to make. I feel like when we call it climate change, that's an accurate term for it. We call it global warming, global cooling, blah, blah, blah. No, there's all kinds of ways to dispute that and to say it's not permanent or we don't know how much we're causing. Okay. Yeah, there's all that and there's a lot of value to a lot of it. But the climate is changing. Okay, we have 5% of the water caps, the snow caps, and a lot of this stuff. Right. This stuff is changing. We don't necessarily know why. We have theories as to why. But the reality is
a lot of good ones, but anyway.
Right, as a society, as an economy, we have to adjust to this. And a lot of it can be traced directly to regulation and public-private partnership and subsidies and just macroeconomic decisions made by the collective And that same macro collective is having a very difficult time adjusting fast enough. They're trying, but they just can't change policies fast enough. So we're really going to have to rethink how we deal with common goods and how we deal with macroeconomics, because this isn't going to last much longer. If we don't stop, nature's going to stop us.
It may. We'll see. So I think it's just to close out. I think it's funny that is a Republican-derived term, climate change, because they wanted to stop saying global warming. But the irony of that is it is more accurate, because like any idiot neocon goes, oh, but it's snowing in Boston. How's it global warming? It's like, it doesn't work that way, you Nimrod. Warming is an aggregate of the whole Earth, not Boston, not London, not Paris, not any one place. It's a global
but here's the thing.
description. But anyhow,
the way I like to look at it is, okay,
but
even if it's not warming, that's still a negative change. If you've got 120 inches of snow in a city that normally gets, about 80?
And it's burying the city and paralyzing
it. Right, that's not
warming,
too. I'll give you that. But it's climate change, and it's climate change that's very, very costly.
Right.
So you can deny it, and you can sit here and argue for days about the causes of it, and you can get into how it's because we're tolerating homosexuals, so now it's hellfire and brimstone. And you can get all that bullshit. Or you can do your job as a goddamn politician and be like, okay, this is a huge problem. What's causing it? What can we do to fix it? How do we address it?
Yeah, we need to be objective about that too, because in Florida they're actually banning that being a named cause, and that's just ridiculous.
What?
You're going to Chicken Little yourself while Miami drowns? It's like, really? You think that's going to help you?
What?
You heard that the Rick Scott administration, he actually told his staffers, do not use climate change, global warming as a term. You can't say it anymore. So it actually showed this hearing going on, and they were discussing, and it's where I'm originally from, Norfolk, Virginia, is just as bad off as Miami. They're already seeing effects of repeated storms that used to not flood the whole city. And, you can't say, they had to study the issue as recurrent flooding problem, not ocean rise, not climate change. It's like, the debate is that fucked up. It's like, when you're even denying what you can see in front of your face, that's pretty bad.
No, but you're telling people not to call it by a certain name. You have to believe it yourself. Rick Scott, we can do a whole show just on him.
I'm going to call him by a certain name. That's for fucking sure. Moron comes to mind.
I can't, right. But, in the 80s, in 1986, when Chernobyl happened, just to give you an idea, Mr. Scott, of who I'm going to compare you to, when Chernobyl happened, for 4 days the Soviet government denied it.
Yeah.
And they said that there's something about unusual weather patterns. So
there's an unusual amount of iodine in the weather right now. Look out.
So
or thorium, or whatever it was. Yeah.
The old Politburo guys that are still alive, they're looking at you, Governor Scott, going, yeah. Good job, Rick. Yeah, we'd let you into our country club. You'd be one of us. We hope you can drink a lot of vodka. Jeez. It's pathetic.
Yeah, we need to get real. So,
right.
Anyway.
Alrighty. Thank you for listening. I'm Neurotoxin.
I'm Joe Ryan. Thank you for listening to The Edge of Chaos. We can be found on the internet at edgeofchaospodcast.com. That's edgeofchaospodcast.com. Contact the show, edgeofchaospodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at edgeofchaosshow. We can also be found on Facebook at facebook.com/The Edge of Chaos. Neurotoxin's blog can be found at neurotoxins with an S, fyg.blogspot.com. For Neurotoxin, this is Joe Ryan. Thank you for listening to The Edge of Chaos.
Oh, fuck, man. I'm having a great fucking time. This is too cool. Well, we gotta talk about one more thing, I guess, huh? I want you to do me a favor. I want you to stop sending money to World Hunger Organization. Well, I don't want to seem cruel, but I'm an American, You're just like you. I think we've done a lot. I think we pretty much fucking give out. We give. And they fucking make these commercials to fuck with your head. You're sitting at home, you're having a wonderful time, enjoying what the fuck you put together from scratch. on your own, in your own life. You turn on the television and they got this fucking 2-year-old, 3-inch waisted kids and they're going, and the voiceover is like, won't you please help? What kind of sick fucking bastard are you? How can you sit there in that air-conditioned, fully heated home with an icebox and cupboard full of food in a country where you can eat 24 hours a day while little Haji pick up that fucking phone? Won't you please help, huh? Kind of sick fuck are you? They're really trying to guilt trip the shit out of him. It's like, hey, why don't you feed him? You're only 5 feet away! Why don't you get him one of your sandwiches you packed for the day, huh, Bob? Fucking commercials, man. You know the guy's right off camera with a Baby Ruth going. They can't see me, can they? Come here. If I could only walk. Come on, it's right there. Reach for it. Come on, they gear these fucking things up to fuck with your head, man. They know what they're doing. You got a director there going, come on, don't feed him yet, don't feed him yet! The light was bad on that last one. Let's get one more take. Come on, Haji, get back in the mud hole. Come on. Come on, let's get out of here, these fucking mosquitoes, Jesus. We don't need that shit. You want to help them? You really want to help these people? Stop sending them food. Don't send these people another bite. You want to help them? Send them U-Hauls. Send them luggage, folks. Send them somebody like me. I'll walk out there. Send a guy out there that goes, hey, we just drove 700 miles with your food. And it occurred to us that there wouldn't be world hunger if you people would live where the food is! You live in a fucking desert! Do you understand that you live in a fucking desert? Yes! You live in a fucking desert! Nothing grows here! Nothing's gonna grow here! Goddamn it, come here! Son of a bitch. You see this, huh? You see this? This is sand, yeah. Did you know nothing can grow in this shit? Did you know that, huh? Here, eat some of it. Taste it, motherfucker. It's sand. You know what's gonna be 100 years from now? It's gonna be sand! You live in a fucking desert! Get your